The gift box for my daughter was empty, but it was the gift she gave back that made her grandfather collapse. I don't think a 7-year-old child can make the man who once called me a burden leave in silence. I didn't know a doodle would be enough to touch a heart that seemed frozen for life. But that Christmas season, in the middle of a family that seemed like there was nothing left to save, my daughter did what I couldn't do for the past 30 years. To will never forget that sound, the sound of wrapping paper tearing apart. It was the only thing anyone heard at that time. No music, no laughter, just a soft crackling sound as my daughter Lucy slowly opened her gift. Her tiny fingers gently pulled each edge of the paper as if she were opening a treasure. And it was true. In that brief moment, Lucy smiled. The soft, hopeful smile that children have when they still believe in miracles. But then, when I opened the gift box, that smile disappeared. Its face changed colour. First is confusion. Then there was something more profound. Hurt, perhaps. My shoulders are stiff. Lucy glanced at me. The box was empty. I saw it before he could even say a word. Just a plain cardboard box. No liners, no toys, no notes. Nothing. I blinked, trying to understand what I was seeing. Are there any mistakes? Maybe someone forgot to put in a gift. Something might have fallen out. But before I could ask, I heard his voice. My father, Thomas. He laughed softly, a short, icy laugh. Sitting back in his familiar armchair, he crossed his arms and said, "You shouldn't expect anything from a child like him. This world has enough freeloaders." I was dumbfounded. Lucy was also motionless. My hand was still in the box, as if I still hoped the gift was hiding in a corner somewhere. But no, nothing. I felt my chest burning, hands tremble on thighs. I want to say something, anything, but the words stuck in his throat like a sharp piece of splintered wood. Then my sister, Danielle, snorted and muttered, "She's like her mother, always expecting others to give it to her for free. It's useless." My jaw clenched. I could feel my facial muscles contracting and hot tears behind my eyelids were about to spill out. I looked at Lucy. The baby hasn't cried yet, but her lips were tightly pursed, her chin trembling slightly, as if just one more word would break her. Your round, gentle eyes were filled with tears, tears that you were too proud to shed. The child looked at me again. Don't ask for help, just asking implicitly, should I pretend it doesn't hurt, Mum? And in that moment, I hated myself. I hate you for bringing me here. Hate for hoping, foolishly, that this family could be different, that my father could change, that they would see Lucy, the bright, kind, creative girl, and love her like I do. But they didn't see it. To them, my child was just an extension of me, a living reminder of my failed marriage, of how I had ruined my life as they thought. The room was eerily silent. Except for the hum of the heater and the grandfather clock behind Thomas, nothing moved. Every second ticked like a countdown to something I wasn't ready to face. Lucy looked down at the gift box again. My hand gently brushed the edge of the box. Then slowly I folded the lid back. The little hands trembled, and then he whispered so softly that I had to hold my breath to hear clearly, "I also have a gift for you, Grandpa." The whole room was silent. Thomas looked up, a mocking smile still on his lips. "Oh, is that so?" he said, his voice half laughing and half challenging. "This must be very interesting." But Lucy didn't back down. My daughter put her hand in her coat pocket. Those tiny fingers gently pulled out a small, neatly folded piece of paper, so carefully that my heart sank. I stepped forward. The hands lifted the piece of paper with both hands as if offering something sacred. And at that moment, I knew it wasn't over. Something is about to happen. Something none of us were ready to face. I haven't been home for Christmas in over 2 years. Not since the divorce. Not since all my last-ditch efforts to fix the family collapsed like cracked glass. But Lucy, she wants to see her grandparents. Almost a month before Christmas, he asked me a question. "Mom, do you have a grandfather?" Simple question. But it was Lucy's way of asking why we were so lonely every holiday season. No matching nightgowns, no big pine trees, no cousins running around together. No laughter echoed in the kitchen, just mother and daughter every year as a habit. I said yes, and when she begged, "Can we go to my grandparents' house this year, Mom?" I nodded again, even though there are thousands of warning bells ringing in my heart. I don't know what to expect, a minor miracle. Perhaps I thought when they saw Lucy, saw her eyes exactly like my mother, when she was young, saw the sincere heart she always carried, they would change, will soften, will feel. But from the moment my car pulled into my parents' driveway, I knew I was wrong. That feeling, like someone placing an invisible sandbag on my shoulder, appeared immediately. With every step I took on the stone path, I felt a ring of barbed wire tightening around my chest. I forgot how heavy that feeling was, having to smile in front of people who don't want me to be there. The house has not changed. Still cold, still brazenly perfect. Every surface is so clean that you dare not touch it. More like a museum than a home. My mother, Evelyn, greeted us with forced politeness that she had honed into instinct. A little hug for me, a faint pat on the head for Lucy. Her eyes stopped for a few seconds at the scratches on the girl's boots. "I see that. The way you judge Lucy is like an unqualified display piece." Danielle, my sister, didn't look up from her phone. "Hi," he said softly, eyes still glued to the screen, then swiped again. "I already know." Right then, that feeling rose in the pit of my stomach, like a premonition that I had made a mistake. Then he, Thomas, my father, while was still sitting in the chair by the fire, a glass of whiskey in one hand, the TV remote in the other, he did not get up. Don't ask. Just nodded and mumbled, "I thought you guys wouldn't come." That's how he said hello. Lucy raised her hand and waved lightly. The small hand wearing a wool glove lifted hesitantly. "Hello, Grandpa," I said. It was as if she was trying to utter a word she had never used. He nodded curtly. "Don't look, don't reply." I don't know why I'm still waiting. Maybe because Lucy tried so hard. She drew pictures for each person, meticulously coloured them and neatly folded them into envelopes with the names of each family member. "You also asked me, Mum, how is Aunt Danielle spelled?" Because it wants everything to be perfect. For a week straight, every night I took care of every stroke. I hoped, I really wanted, this would be the Christmas you'd never forget. No matter how strange and distorted this family is, I collected every tip money, worked a few extra weekend shifts to buy her a new dress, a small gift, and enough gas to drive 4 hours back here. That morning when I wrapped my baby in a towel before leaving the house, Lucy looked up at me, her eyes sparkling. "Mom, do you think they will like my paintings?" I smiled. "They will love them, my child." But deep down I know the truth. I knew I was bringing my daughter to a home where kindness was a conditional commodity, where smiles are measured and love always comes with the word if. I thought to myself, this is because of Lucy. I can be patient. I can pretend for a day. I will endure, as long as the child is happy. But when I see my child's heart silently broken by an empty box, I know they haven't changed, and I'm not sure if they will ever change. Lucy stood up from her chair, still holding the small folded piece of paper. The room seemed to freeze. No one laughed. No one said, even Danielle, always talkative, was silent. The girl strolled towards her grandfather, the way Lucy walked, gently, as if afraid of waking something up in this already too cold house. I want to say something, want to stop you. But when Lucy turned to look at me, her eyes were unusually calm, not sad, not afraid, just a fierce peace. I nodded. A slight nod as if to say, "Mum, I have to do this." Thomas didn't bother leaning forward. He just glanced at the piece of paper with indifferent eyes, a familiar look I had seen hundreds of times, when someone dared to ask him to feel something other than himself. "Oh yeah," he said, his voice absent-mindedly. "Did you draw me a snowman?" Every word was dipped in sarcasm, like he was talking to someone who wasn't smart enough to survive in the real world. But Lucy didn't tremble. The girl never backed down. I walked closer, hands shaking slightly but steady, and held out the paper with both hands. I suddenly realized those little hands were shaking. I know that feeling. The slight tremor when you're trying to do something nice, even though your heart is beating like a drum. Thomas took the piece of paper like he was a bill, a worthless object. The other hand still holds the glass of wine. He opened it without haste, almost carelessly. Then he looked, and he stopped. I don't see anything on paper, but I saw his face. It doesn't wrinkle in discomfort. Nor did he raise his eyebrows in a mocking manner like usual. Instead, his forehead frowned slightly. His eyebrows pulled together. He blinked. Once, then again. His mouth opened somewhat, as if he had forgotten what he was doing. The whole room seemed to lean toward him. Danielle jumped out first. "What is that?" No one answered. Thomas said nothing. Lucy stood there, 2 hands clasped together, legs slightly together. "Your face looks like you're waiting, but not pleading, just quiet. It's like it doesn't even know what's coming." I stood up, stepped towards your child. Every step I take, it's like I'm stepping on a floor full of old memories, arguments in different eyes, winter days when no one asked me if I was cold. I put my hand on Lucy's back. The child did not turn to me, still looking at Grandpa, waiting. And Thomas, he looks older. Not the type that is old because of age. It's old because of fatigue, because a memory has just been touched. He folded the piece of paper more carefully than I expected, each corner, each fold. Then he placed it on the table next to the chair. "Don't throw, don't push away, just put it down," as if it was the only thing in the room he needed to preserve. Then he stood up. No one moved. No one understood what just happened. Thomas, who once criticized me for crying while watching cartoons, stood up quietly and left the room. "Don't say a word." The sound of his footsteps echoed on the wooden floor like an unnamed song. Not grumpy, not angry, just empty. No one called back. No one followed. He disappeared through the door like a ghost. I looked at Lucy. I'm still standing. Then he looked up at me. "Mom, did I do something wrong?" I knelt. "Hug your child tightly." "No, Lucy, you did something brave." Danielle mumbled something under her breath, but I ignored it, because I know no matter what Lucy drew or wrote, it touched a deep place in his heart, a place I have never reached. I don't scream, don't cry, no blame. I just gave you a gift that reminded him that he was still human, and perhaps that was what scared him the most. Thomas did not return to the living room that night, not when my mother called him to dinner with her forced, sweet voice, not when Danielle complains that the turkey is drier than last year, not when the whole family turns to dessert, not once. Lucy didn't mention anything about him anymore. She just sat next to me playing with the ribbon from her other small gift, then folding up the scraps of wrapping paper as if she was trying to keep things tidy so no one would get any more angry. But I can see it. She's not really there. Every time I raise my head, my eyes turn to the hallway where he disappeared, quietly, like waiting for a miracle, as if I still believe someone will come back. But there was no one. The next morning I decided to leave early. I said we had plans in Portland, a lie I didn't feel guilty about. I can't stand another morning sitting among people pretending last night never happened. Danielle didn't bother to leave the room. My mother put a plate of cold meat wrapped in aluminum foil into my hand and said, "Drive carefully." No mention of Thomas. Don't ask if Lucy is okay. Not a word. Strangely, it's that silence, that hurts the most. On the way back, the car passed through snow-covered forests. Lucy leaned her head against the glass door, her eyes watching every passing tree. I reached out to hold my child's hand. She clenched her fist, lightly, but enough for me to know that she was thinking. I didn't ask anything. Do not force your child to talk about the drawing. I don't want to break that fragile moment where something beautiful happened, even for just a moment. But my head kept spinning. What did the child draw? What made Thomas, who once called me weak just because I cried when I failed a scholarship, quietly leave like that? I didn't have an answer until 4 days later. A gloomy afternoon. A small parcel box is placed in front of the door, no sender name. There was only the handwritten note with a shaky pen, to Lucy. I called my child back. Lucy opened the box carefully, as if afraid that hoping again would hurt her. Inside is a small wooden music box, old-style hand-engraved edges, lid, painted with red roses. When you turned the crank, the melody, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, rang out, vaguely gently, as if from another world. There was a piece of paper attached, just one line. To the bravest girl I know, thank you for remembering her. Do not sign, but we all know whose it is. Lucy hugged the music box to her chest. I didn't say anything. No need to say anything. The smile on your child's lips, warm, gentle, is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I sat down next to my child and whispered, Lucy, what did you draw for me? I raised my head, eyes sparkling. I drew him, holding my grandmother's and mother's hands. I just wrote one more line. I hope he will smile again one day, because I remember how she used to make him smile. I got a lump in my throat. Can't say anything, because that's the part I've forgotten. The part of me that once existed in my father, the man who loved, who laughed before pain turned him into a stone statue. Lucy, with a child's touch, touched the part that time and resentment cannot erase. That night, when Lucy fell asleep, I sat beside her bed, gently stroking her hair, thin brown curls that still smelled of the cold wind from the street. The music box was placed right on the bedside table, the lid still not completely closed. A melody lingered in the air slowly, as if it didn't want to end. I look at my child, a child who still believes in good things even though this world has never been easy for him. I knew at that moment what I had to do. The next morning I sent my mother a brief text message. Thank you for the meal, Merry Christmas, but this will be the last time. There is no anger, no blame, just the truth. I removed all remaining family photos from my mother's side of the refrigerator from the photo frame and my heart. Every time I clean up a photo, I feel lighter. It's not because I don't love them, but because I stopped trying so hard to be loved by them again. I used to think, if I just try a little harder, they will see, seeing how good I was at being a single mother and seeing how excellent Lucy is. See, I don't need to be accepted, just seen, but no. That recognition never came. I remember sitting in front of the mirror in the bathroom of my old house, 15 years old, learning how to stop crying in silence so that no one in the house would be bothered by my feelings. I lived like that, quietly, no things, not required. Don't bother anyone. But today I decided I don't live like that anymore. Don't let Lucy live like that. I didn't tell anyone. Don't wait for anyone to apologize. Don't expect a conversation to clarify things. I just retreated. One cold afternoon I took Lucy to a small park near my house. The grass is still covered with frost. I carry a music box with me and put it next to me when I play on the swing. I sat on the bench, watching my child run around, laughter ringing out in the cold. And I realized, this is family. No need for a crowded party. No one needs to call me by my name on the invitation list. All it takes is a child who knows how to love, and a mother who has learned to let go of things that are no longer worthy. That afternoon I drove through the old street where my parents' house used to be. I don't stop. Don't slow down. Just passing by like a scene from an old movie. You've seen it, you've cried, and now all that's left is the afterglow. I didn't look back, not once, and for the first time in many years I felt something very similar to free. Every night before going to bed, Lucy turns the crank of the music box. It's not always about listening. There are nights when I just sit there, my eyes slightly closed, my hand gently resting on the lid as if I can feel the melody even though the sound hasn't yet sounded. That tiny box now sits on the nightstand among some old stuffed animals and a comic book I often reread. I looked at my child, the nightlight gently illuminating his cheeks, reflecting something very gentle in his sparkling eyes. My daughter has never met her grandmother, but every time she talks about it, her voice still lowers a tone as if she's talking about someone sacred. "Mom, is your smile beautiful?" I smiled. She used to laugh very well, and she used to make Grandpa laugh too. Lucy nodded as if she had just reaffirmed a belief. I think I know how to make him smile again. We started to live differently after that trip. Not a significant change, nothing flashy or explosive, just small habits, simple but warm. Every Sunday is pancake day, even if I'm a terrible cook. One time the cake burned black as bricks. Lucy laughed hard, chewing and saying, "Next time I'll add more cream, Mum, to cover the burning smell." I laughed. It's been a long time since I laughed like that. A laugh without fatigue or defensiveness. Thursday night we have our own story time. I told Lucy about my childhood, both the sweet and the bitter things, without shying away. In return, he told me about his wishes. I wish to own a bakery to give free cakes to those who are sad. Every time I hear my child speak, I feel lighter, like I'm removing layers of dust from memories on my heart. I started writing again, not for posting. Don't let anyone read it, just writing so that the things I never dared to say have a place to live. I write about the sadness of being ignored, about the feeling of living in a family where everything you do well is taken for granted, and even a small mistake becomes proof that you are not enough. One night I just wrote one line and then stopped writing. The line is, "My children have forgiven those I still cannot," and I cried. I'm not ready to forgive. Maybe never. But I know Lucy doesn't need retaliation. I don't need my grandfather to kneel and apologize. I just need to see him as he used to be, a man who knew how to love. And somehow in that innocent silence she did what I couldn't do for 30 years. A week after Christmas I received an envelope in the mail. No sender address. The scribbled handwriting I still recognized immediately. 3 lines short, "I was wrong about you. She's a good kid. I hope you're okay." Do not sign. No apologies, not a single redundant line, but I know. And I cry, not because it erases the years of estrangement, not because it makes everything perfect, but because for the first time I felt like he really saw me. And more than that, he saw Lucy. We won't go back to that house again. But sometimes on the way through the old neighborhood, Lucy would look out the window, not because she expected anything. Just look. Then he turned to me and said, "I think you'll listen to my music box every night." I don't answer. But I know in my heart it really happened. Not everyone needs to be fixed. Some people just need to be remembered that they once knew love. And there are children who, in a very natural, very gentle way, give others that memory, like Lucy did. I'm not trying to change you, I just remind you that there was once a person you made smile, and there was a little girl still waiting for you to smile again. People often ask me, why did you return to that house that year? Why did you let your daughter face the people who hurt you? Why didn't you protect her from what you experienced? And I didn't know how to answer that enough. But now I have the answer. I used to think I was protecting Lucy by keeping her away. Don't tell old stories, no mention of cold Christmases. Don't let my children see the cracks that I always hide behind my smile. I thought that was good. I thought that was love. But then it only took Lucy one Christmas, one empty gift, one tiny act of tenderness, to remind me that sometimes love is letting the other person see everything, both the light and the darkness, and then letting them choose their way through. It took me 30 years to get a 3-line letter. It only took Lucy 3 minutes with 1 drawing and 1 sentence. I don't scream. No resentment, no challenge. I just give away. And in that way, I changed what I thought was unchangeable. I don't know if Thomas will ever become a decent grandfather. Maybe not. But for a moment, just a moment, he opened the door that had been locked for so long. And through that crack in the door, a piece of paper slipped in. A small gift was sent, a thank you note written with a shaky hand. And that was enough. Now every time I look at Lucy spinning the music box on the table, I no longer see the image of a hurt child. I see a strong child, not because he won, but because he loved even though he knew he might be rejected. I don't need an apology to forgive. You don't need recognition to know you have value. I just need to allow yourself to be yourself, gentle, sincere, and solid in its way. I learnt that from my children, and if you've made it this far, you might also need to hear this. Not everyone deserves to move on with us, but everyone deserves a chance to see the good things they once forgot. Not because they deserve it, but because we deserve to live with a light heart. You may be holding on to an unsent letter, an unspoken sentence, a wound that hasn't healed yet. You may have also thought that if you just try a little harder, someone will understand, but sometimes it's not about trying to be understood. It's about accept that you are enough even if they don't understand. If you have ever been looked down upon, forgotten, being treated like your feelings are a demand, you are not wrong. You are only loving people who have not learned how to love appropriately. And if this story touches you, please share. Comment. Send it to someone silent for a long time like you. Who knows, maybe a music box will start making sounds in their hearts, like it did for me and Lucy. Because sometimes a whisper can move more than a scream, and a gentle act, no matter how small, can open a door that another person's entire life cannot break.